everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Heart Next Door podcast. This is a special, exciting episode because we are live at New Lab, which is Credit Michigan Central, and I have an incredible founder. We are both for this incredible program called Founder Forward, and so as we were talking, I just noticed he just has such a wealth of knowledge. He is such a light and such a pathful work, and he has wisdom beyond his ages. And so I just had to bring him here to you all and just give you the opportunity to hear him firsthand. And I'm going to allow him to introduce himself so that he can really do it justice. But please welcome to the Heart Next Door, Adrian Night.
Yes, well, I'm Adrian Night. I'm founder and CEO of Pace My Energy. What we do is we assess people with persistent activity limiting fatigue and help them understand their overexertion that limits their baselines and anything regarding their functional capacity and their ability to perform daily tasks. So I thank you for having me. This is fantastic.
Of course, thank you. And so I'll ask you again, what is your why? What led you to this journey to building this tool to help impact people?
Yeah, for me, it was being in med school, being 3 years in, and having to undergo all these different tasks, going to the ER twice and not being able to receive help, and knowing you have this medical background, but they encounter people who are in the same field as you, who aren't able to treat you. When you experience persistence, you have this unexplained symptom that's so vague that most practitioners just skate over it because they're looking for more acute. Not something that's ongoing, that's frequent, that's unrelenting. So when I had to take medical school to actually go about how do I take care of myself? How do I heal myself? It was a journey into the unknown because of the fact that almost no practitioner had concrete guidance on how to do it. And that's kind of where the starter of my journey began with my company. And now just kind of automating that process.
Right.
Yeah, so that way we can alleviate that user burden of having to figure it out themselves and provide an actual support that's there, that's necessary, and that's research backed to manage your fatigue, manage your energy in accordance with actual guidance from the patient.
And just to show you all how much of a powerhouse he is before we go deep into it, you started building your company less than 6 months ago. Is that correct?
Yes,
and
that's
in
true.
such a short span of time, you've already built a team, have these huge pilots, and just full-fledged, full-force impact is what you're actually living and manifesting. I think that's so beautiful, and I think one of the things that you said that really impacts me and resonates with me is you said you wanted to figure out how to heal yourself.
Yes.
And I think coming from this whole journey, at least for me, starting with the maternal health landscape as a mom, realizing how much disparity there is within the healthcare system. And I think one of the most troubling things to me is that so often we go to doctors and when we go to healthcare systems, we're not taught that we have the power to heal. So we don't learn that. So we go to doctors, we go to hospitals, we want them to heal us, giving them all of this power, and unfortunately, so much harm to us taking advantage of, and if it's not talked about enough.
It's because they've always been positioned as the expert. Everyone, the industry, to marketing, media, they say, oh, look, we do have a problem, go to the doctor, call the doctor. Not your patient is the subject matter of their own experiences, and not every patient is the same. So when you're actually looking at, when I have a problem, the first person you should look at is yourself, and just really evaluate what is it that I'm actually experiencing. Even if I don't have the right terminology to describe it medically, I know what it feels. I know how it presents in my body. I know what I feel, even if it's referred pain versus outright you can see immediately injury or the ligaments or something. It becomes an actual face where okay, this patient almost didn't experience it. So that's not just gaslighting the patient. and say, okay, now we need to form our text that's more objective to get to this reason. We understand your subjective experience, helping them that subjective experience now pull objective metrics to actually understand this experience as a whole, not just isolated in my domain of expertise. And then you don't know what you don't know, especially as a provider. Then it's, what can I get the right information, or who can I direct them to, so they have the most outrageous information, and then how do I follow up on it to make sure it doesn't get lost? Yeah, while they're navigating the journey.
Right, because we talked about this earlier. So often the conventional way is you go through a crush 15-minute provider, and then they're supposed to give you like the roots, the cure, and the solution, all that in 15 minutes. It's not really even knowing like the full breadth of who you are as a person, like this treating you as a blank slate, right? And so, what I really love about your journey too, if you can share with people when you were in medical school, you were studying a specific type of medicine, not just standard medicine. Can you bring it down?
Yeah, so I was studying naturopathic medicine. So what we do is we evaluate patients. We spend 2 hours with them in comparison to most physicians to really get the comprehensive look of what this patient is, both their mind, body, their spirit, to really understand who's sitting in front of them. Now, when we do our tests, we're trained as non-simple physicians, but we also train how to treat these acute and chronic conditions naturally. And most doctors see holistic medicine, things like that. Versus actually acknowledging the research from the NIH, research from the British Medical Journal, research that has published documents on the benefits of natural medicine. And some of the research is so advanced to where it shouldn't even be. And a lot of the times that gets ignored, either through medical ignorance or a lack of updated training, because what we typically do see with professionals going to medical school after they do residency, yes, there is a continual education requirement. However, they get to opt into whatever they want to opt into to continue that education. Not necessarily something that advances their areas of in domains that they're not necessarily in. And I really think that update becomes strategic from that provider themselves. So whether that provider has desire to learn, or are they just letting come to work and they work by 412s or 312s and then go home? And if they're a specialist, that would just come in and do surgery and then leave. Like, they may not have the desire to do it because the medical industry has really incentivized them to. And I think when I'm looking at it from the patient's perspective, they want to provide who is individualized, who's looking at them, not just who's this person in a big population. It's who is this person who's sitting in front of me? How can I provide the best treatment within this 15 minutes? And even if they have a presentation that's similar to someone I just experienced 2 hours ago, they're not that person.
Right, and that's such a huge difference maker. 15 minutes as opposed to 2 hours. Yes. We were talking about this before. We missed the day where you can go in and your provider, right?
Yes.
Right?
like they were family. Yeah.
And I think that the question for me, and I think for most of us, becomes like, how do we veer so far off to where this becomes a norm? You study naturopathic medicine, which to me, when I hear that implies that this is the natural way, this is the way of our origin. When we think about medicine, when we think about herbs, when we think about the way things were done before, right? In a way that wasn't necessarily right now. I feel like medicine and the medical industry is working in a way where care is so reactive as opposed to proactive, right? Like not just to treat the root and the cause, but just like putting band-aids on things that are so deeper, right? And there's so much more attention. And so from your standpoint, I'm curious, how do you think we got so far away from that? And what's the solution?
Well, there's a history. There was like a war going on between the American Medical Association and naturopathic doctors all the way back in the 1800s. Yes, yeah. So there was a whole war between natural medicine and actual institutional medicine. Even when it came down to like medical doctors versus osteopathic doctors or DOs, right? So even though now we see MDs and DOs as virtually the same, they weren't always the same because the American Medical Association went to war against them as well. And before they were officially adopted to their organization. And that's kind of the same thing you see with chiropractic medicine. It's the same thing you see with natural medicine. Like, when you look at medical doctors, you're basically looking at allopathic practitioners versus osteopathic practitioners, which are DOs, versus those who are naturopathic doctors who are either identified as a NP or a national medical doctor, or a national medical physician, depending on where they're at. So what we're looking at is there's different training requirements, there's different things we're assessing, look at different specialties. And unlike in these fields, like naturopathic doctor residency is optional, but most naturopathic doctors are interested in it. Versus what we see burden physicians going through their own residency. There's a high amount of burnout and all of these things that we're seeing because of the grind of the medical industry to program. How do I make this position the most efficient in the hospital setting? And in residency, it's meant to, in my opinion, to break you down, to produce one type of doctor that serves the operational setting of the clinic, of the provider's hospital, not the best doctor, creating the best doctor to treat. And I think that's what we're seeing versus when we look at natural medicine. After we finish and they go into residency, if they go into residency, their primary goal, because we have a different goal from their order, is to treat patients. And we know, because of our teachings, patient is the teacher. So our entire goal is to learn the most we can from our patient to provide the most accurate care. Not just have you come through the for 15 minutes and then save you for labs, get the labs back, and then we'll follow up with you. Or we don't know what's going on. We can't fully confirm, but we're just going to reassure you and monitor you over the course of the next 6 months. Is can we actually get to a solution that can provide the most immediate benefit to you to provide some level of care as we go along this process? And that's what I typically see the difference between the specialties.
And that's such a perspective shift, right? Like, patient is the teacher as opposed to going to these conventional settings. I think that oftentimes the position is not the same. Like, you go to, you're looking to go as the expert, right? And I think oftentimes they're looking at themselves as the expert too, right? And which is why we hear about unfortunate cases of people having interaction with their doctors when they feel dismissed and unheard. And like, they're saying, I feel this is what's going on in my body, but they're dismissed by physicians that are saying, no,
Yeah, and I would say that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is medical malpractice and the mishandling of the patient because of the fact that they were willing to ignore what the patient was trying to die. And when we see that in care, I see it as completely dismissive of the industry, that they know that they're not going to. And if they're adequately mishandling the patient, that those orders come from leadership, those stuff from the actual hospital setting, not just from the individual doctor. Because it's about the culture. Everything that any practitioner does is always through the lens of where we're going. And I think that's what I'm seeing is like what you just mentioned there. Have people who are being asked, knowing their experience versus just let me at least try to validate what they're experiencing. Like, can I connect with you as a human, not just as a patient? Like, we're both human. And yes, I may be an expert. Yes, I may have gone through extensive medical school and extensive research and have all of these accolades. But then it's, at the end of the day, when I go home, I'm still weak. The white coat comes off, and I'm there with my family, I'm there with my friends, my children, and just showing them the best that I can. And that doesn't mean anything. So then if that's the case, any patient who comes to see you, they should be treated the same as like, okay, you're going to go speak to your child. Then it's okay, what about to my child? Is there anything difference in the advice I would give if this was someone I knew. And that unfamiliarity with healthcare practitioners and their patient populations is becoming a staggering that we're seeing.
It's just so unfortunate. I mean, I think especially when I think about it, right? It sucks because the situation is so severe where you're seeing moms die and like it's literally become like you know, somebody being ignored, a mom being ignored when she says my body doesn't feel right. I feel like Serena Williams is a perfect example. She shares her story so much and just talks about how she had to advocate for herself. And I just, my heart and my reason why that I do this work that I do in maternal health is because it's those folks who feel like they can't advocate for themselves. And I want to help them to realize that we have all the power, right? You are the answer. The patient is the expert.
Yes.
Women have been giving birth for hundreds of years since the dawn of time, right?
Like, even when you look at the foundations of how gynecology is happening, like, you're looking at a population of people, especially black and brown bodies, that was a significant to improve that entire industry. And yet, the outcomes don't necessarily support the people who are testing on. So, then when I'm looking at that, then it's like, okay, well, how did we get so far away from actually serving the patient? And when we're looking at, especially maternal death, it's things that are preventable. Like, and that's the wildest thing that I'm like, so many situations that we're looking at are completely preventable. Like, I can't understand if it was an emergency C-section that just came out. But not when this person's been going to this hospital, getting all of these things, and going through this comprehensive treatment with one practitioner throughout the life cycle of the pregnancy, only to then be mishandled when it's time to deliver. It doesn't make any sense. And I think we, for far too long, we've been just saying, like, oh, well, there's things that we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
But there's things that we do know, and despite us knowing it, we ignore it. Because it's understandable, like, okay, they want you to see more patients within a certain amount of time because we're paying this out. But that does not dismiss your actual oath of care and the care you must provide to your patient, no matter how many patients you have. And like, if my doctor doesn't even know my name and they know me by my EHR, then it's like, okay, well, like, now you're reducing me to what's simple. You're reducing me to a condition. Now, actual healing your interaction.
It's that community piece, right? It's that community piece, right? I think that's just what, like, that's why the company is called Partners.
Yeah.
I think that a part of it is always love, right?
Yeah.
Every interaction, everything in this world can be solved, like love. Like, if you just have a little bit more love, like, care when I was at the hospital, when the most vulnerable position, saw me as like, this is the same love and care that you would your daughter or your niece, right? If we saw each other, I think that community would just be so much better off than I really are. Right? I just figured for your mom, you told the story about your mom, right? For everyone, right? And so to the woman, to the person, to, you know, the family who's trying to learn, who's realizing that maybe a light bulb went off in this, and like, oh, I do have power. Like, what would you say? How would somebody go about like that?
I would say one of the first steps of advocating is self-nutrition. It's like, it's hard to advocate for yourself when you don't have that peace. So, like, knowing, like, okay, what is it that I'm currently experiencing? Who are things in my current life? And why did I go through it? Right? And then seeing that, okay, now, after I have collected all of this information, the very next visit I go to is, I go to the visit, I speak to this physician, I leave the physician, I get the follow-up documentation about the whole visit, right? And making sure that documentation actually lines up with the experience that we had in our office. Because if that's not the case, there's probably documentation, right? So even if it's a thing of saying, oh, well, your doctor didn't recommend this, or they recommended this, that should also be the documentation.
Yeah.
If they refuse to give, that should also gave it that sanitation.
Yeah.
Making sure that there's an accurate record that reflects what actually happened is going to be your biggest tool in how you navigate through this. And even then, like hospitals have patient advocates. Yes, they do. And they don't typically market that they have patient advocates. So you can usually contact one of the hospital's care managers or care coordinators and ask to have that patient advocate. Oftentimes, especially those who are disabled or have pain in symptoms, may actually just receive that because of the fact that they're sometimes unable to advocate for themselves. That also comes down to the culture of the hospital.
Yeah.
Versus some hospitals don't even feel like, oh, there's a person here whose literal job is to advocate for you in settings that you can't necessarily advocate for yourself, or to make sure that your care is continuous while you're in hospital. Right. So, but most of that is social structure, not necessarily the clinical organization.
Next. In your perspective, you had a med, right? Like, thinking about
in my ideal world, that had a perfect magic wand, I would see healthcare as being so centralized that your care and your care management becomes seamless. That it doesn't matter who you go to, it doesn't matter what provider you go to, and have the information that they need to actually treat between systems. I think when we look at a lot of these, just the medical industry as a whole, there's a heavy emphasis on IP and protecting IP, intellectual property, and the assets of the hospital. Versus when we get so deep and entrenched in those positions, it stops innovation. And I think, and in my perfect world, it would be, there has to be some way to collaborate, even though we're all in our privatized industries, to collaborate to provide some level of continuity of care and seamless care integration without it being bottlenecked by any particular company or any particular company. I know they look to pursue that when they create things like federal IT standards or interoperability of healthcare systems, right? But you still have big major companies controlling that access, right? And my ideal will be the single surface of truth does not exist with the actual hospital or the healthcare network. It exists with you. Which is why I would place my energy within looking to do was integrate interoperability into our platform to where your own device, your own record exists with you. And it can interact with any care practitioner you go to and push your data that's necessary to you into their system without any barriers. That's what we're looking to solve, because we know a lot of our customers have been exposed to all kinds of institutions. And because we know that, whether it's inpatient, outpatient, private consultation, health coaches, things like that, utilize all kinds of things. It's, can we actually get the information that they need versus now I'm calling your primary care office and now I have to wait for them to fax over documentation, fax of all things. And then you may or may not get it by the time you're appointed. And even if you do get it, now your new doctor that you're seeing, the specialist, is reading over the last visit, and you're like, well, that's not what it is.
Yeah. Right.
So then now you're following up with your other office.
Yeah.
And then that specialist, whose job is to specialize in that care, is becoming your primary care physician.
Integrate that. Right? The moms are using the app. If they are the ones that own like their symptoms, they're checking it, what's going on with them, and then if they opt into it, they can immediately inform their lactation, specialist, their partner. So everybody knows what's going on. Like the mom doesn't have to inform all of these, people in disconnected places. Or she said like a single procedure, which is so important. I think that's critical to like saving lives.
It is, because like healthcare isn't just history.
Right.
It's responsible to everyone we interact with. Like, and we saw it like during COVID, like everyone was in their own social isolation and the states that they were in, like we saw the increase in population health and transmission. And because of that, we know that we're responsible for each other just as much as the healthcare industry is responsible and have a duty of care to treat us with respect, to treat us accurately according to the standards that they have in the profession that we see, right? And because we know this, then it's how can we actually support each other? Because we're all aiming towards the same goal. Your doctor may be a doctor, but you also have issues. Your doctor may be a physician, board certified, triple board certified, yet they still have like problems that they themselves have to go to another physician to treat, right? So then, like I even talk to my physician, like if you have a situation where you wouldn't even go to your physician to address it, that's an issue that you should be solving. Because otherwise, we just continue this harm. It's like this victim perpetrator situation. And if you're continuing that and not actually looking to solve it at the level that you can, then it's a issue. Like when a patient comes to see you, they should be happy with it. Not feel burdened that they have to come to this appointment. They should feel ecstatic that they get to see you. And I think that's one of the things I love that I've seen in naturopathic medicine. Even in some like integrative health clinics that I haven't seen in multi-disciplinary clinics that I've seen versus just standardized family medicine practices, is a lot of patients are happy to come.
Wow.
Because they're like, oh, I get to go get chiropractic, I get to go get acupuncture, I get to go and try some new like herbs and tinctures and like things like that versus just, well, I have a standardized appointment for the rest of life, and, and like it's just not, it's not inviting.
Right. I think that's beautiful. I think that we should all I am optimistic that we are heading in the way with people like you, right? Where like it gives me so much hope about like what's in store, for us in the future. And I'm so thankful to you, Tim, that you
Yes,
like for the light that you are, for the work that you're doing, and I'm so excited for what Case Manager is going to be here to do.
Oh no, I can't wait, and I'm right here with your company as well because we need to see the change in maternal health and how that's actually handled in the United States, especially because when we're looking at what it looks like in the United States versus globally, we have some very big issues to solve.
Yeah. Where they can connect with you.
Yeah.
Get a little bit more engagement.
So if you'd like to connect with us, we're Pace My Energy at Pace My Energy on all platforms. Yeah, and if you would like to see our website, it's www.pacemyenergy.com. And if you'd like to send us an email, it's info@pacemyenergy.com.
As simple as that. Well, thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time on The Heart Next Door.